Hello and welcome to the Engerati studio here at Itron Utility Week. I'm joined now, you can tell this is live. I'm joined now by Peter Jansen from Capgemini. And Peter, firstly, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I was particularly excited to have you here because, you work for Capgemini, but I know that Capgemini also are implanted in a lot of utilities. You've got a lot of first-hand experience, so I feel like I'm talking to the end customer a little bit when we talk about you and bringing some of those experiences to bear. But just kick us off, one of the things that I wanted to explore with you, it's a narrative that's going through this conference, and it's one word, it's resourceful.
Correct.
So can you just talk a little bit about, what your meaning is behind that and how you're seeing that?
Yes, certainly. In terms of being resourceful, we all know that when it comes to natural resources, whether it's energy sources or water, there's not an infinite amount of those resources, and we need to manage them carefully. And a lot of the solutions and discussions that have occurred at this conference have been around the technologies that we can put in place, technologies we can put in the field and into the utilities that help conserve those resources, whether it be water, whether it be electricity or natural gas. Again, if we just step at it from the perspective of it's not infinite, there's a finite amount of these resources. Different geographic areas are more blessed with some than others, certainly where it comes to fresh water. A lot of the Great Lakes and the Americas, we don't have as many problems. You go out to the West Coast, Lake Mead, California, it's much more significant. So how do we get this culture of conservation in place? How do we use the technologies that we have available to us to actually bring conservation to the forefront and be more resourceful?
Do you think that, it's a very simple word, resourceful, but do you think that it is, from what you've seen, working with utilities, do you see it being enough of a driver for those businesses? Because, like you say, on the one hand, it is about being resourceful, but on the other hand, there are some, they're the customers, right? I turn on my tap, I want it to flow. I turn on the lights, I want it to go on. So, how much is being done to communicate what you said, that these things aren't infinite, or in a period of time may be scarce?
Well, that's a good question, and I think we in North America and developing in the developed nations, we take it all for granted. As you say, you turn on your faucet, you expect clean water, not just water, clean water, and you certainly flip a light switch, you expect electricity all the time, or you expect your home to be heated with natural gas. There's no question of is it available or isn't it available, and I'm not suggesting it's going to run out tomorrow. But we do have to be cognizant of the fact that there are limits to that. I think in order to grab people's attention around it, especially the end consumers, I think utilities understand it, but from the end consumer's perspective, a lot of it comes down to monetary, to money. If electricity is very cheap, and it is in many parts of this country, there's no impetus to try and reduce the usage on it. When you start to get into advanced metering and you get the technologies out in the field and the back office systems in place so that you can do peak time rebates or time of use rates. I live in Ontario, Canada, and we have time of use rates, and the cost per kilowatt hour during the day is substantially greater than the cost of kilowatt hour at night. So there's once you understand that, once you're able to monitor your usage, once you're able to see what the impact is on you, again, financially, people start to, I think, take greater
Do you not
interest.
think that then on a very sort of top, more philosophical level, that we've kind of grown up spoilt, and there's this idea that everything's always there, and like you rightly said, it's always been one of the arguments about, hey, you can do demand response, and let's take it a little bit further afield. I was talking about this to a utility in Vienna, and they were saying, you know what, our prices are so cheap because we're blessed with hydro, and it's so cheap that if someone did absolutely everything, built a passive house and turned everything on and off as and when it was, at most they could save €5 a year, right? So, so again, in those situations, I mean, do we not have a need overall as an industry to say that these resources, it is real? Like you said, it's not tomorrow, but it's further down the line.
I think so, and I also think that it's going to have different applicability in different geographies. You're right, a lot of jurisdictions who use hydroelectric power, it's clean, it's cheap, and it keeps flowing. As long as water keeps flowing through a generator, you keep producing electricity. There are other jurisdictions that rely on coal in order to generate their electricity. And in a lot of jurisdictions that it's been mandated that those coal-fired plants, because the carbon emissions start to be cut down, phased out, and retired. Well, what's the alternative to that? Nuclear is very clean, but nobody wants a nuclear reactor in their backyard. So you start to look at if the ability to produce the electricity starts to be reduced itself. So in order to, if the ability to produce it is reduced, then prices will go up. It's supply and demand. I mean, that's the reality. So if more people start to think about conservation now, and not only for the good of the planet, because that's obviously something that's very important, but also just for the ability to manage a scarce resource.
And so let's throw it back to the real world with your experience working with utilities and so on. What are the sort of solutions and services that this industry is bringing to bear to deal with this challenge? Can you just talk a little bit about what your experience has been there?
Well, I think fundamentally it starts with everything we're seeing here today, and that's getting the technology out into the field, be it smart meters or gas modules or smart meters on water. So getting the technology out in the field and getting the communications. Can I ask you
something about smart meters? I mean, in your opinion, and again, your opinion I'm asking for here, how fundamental is the smart meter for this resourcefulness? Because again, now this is my opinion. I feel, in the UK anyway, that some of the idea of the smart meter has almost been missold to the public, that hey, you put this in, you will have lower electricity bills, rather than what I feel, and maybe it's because I'm in the industry, I would take this message that if you put this in, it'll give us a better idea of how we're using our energy, therefore it gives us more data so we can plan forward, and the impact will be 4 years down the line.
Right. So, to my mind, putting a smart meter on the side of a house doesn't guarantee in any way, shape, or form that it's going to be cheaper. What it starts to do is build the platform, the foundation between the meter and the communications network and the ability to collect the data back at the utility. It starts to set that platform to allow people choice. And people like choice. Some studies have shown that when consumers understand what their consumption is and when it's being consumed and how it's being consumed, they can reduce up to 10% of their consumption. So
but it's a proactive choice.
It's a choice, and some people like choice, and some people don't really take that much interest in having the choices.
And what are some of the other solutions that you're seeing this industry adopt and so on? Because I was reading a fascinating report by an analyst firm who were talking to utility execs, and there are a number of things that were coming out. One of them was that the ability to plan, the event horizon of planning, was kind of gone from 10 years to 5, and now some of them saying, hey, I can't even see 3. And people were asked about disruption, and the single biggest disruptive technology that came out of there was energy storage. Some of the things that Elon Musk is doing with the Powerwall and so on. Are there any sort of solutions that you see where the industry needs to put in place in order to play with that disruption?
Well, again, I think it's part and parcel, and when we talk about advanced metering or smart metering, again, that's a foundation. So that allows you the ability to do the two-way communications and understand what's happening and gather the data that you need. From there, you get into the smart cities. Now you've got the data, now you've got the ability to control devices, and you can get into how you can better enhance the use of plug-in electric vehicles. Again, a great, it's not a storage device as you might think about a battery, but there's the whole notion of if you can recharge your car at night when the energy is inexpensive and put it back on the grid during the day, it is in its own sense.
But it's not that crazy to think about it. So you couple an electric vehicle with a self-driving electric vehicle, suddenly you've got a mobile battery, right?
Exactly.
So you could, and it's not that crazy to say you could Uber a battery if you need it, right?
That's true.
We're laughing about it, but those leaps of faith are not that crazy. Right. What are the implications for utilities with some of the stuff that's happening at the edge and actually outside of the normal energy business?
Well, and again, maybe just before we go to that, the other key aspect is, of course, renewables, renewable energies. Putting solar panels on the roof of your house, or using roofing shingles now that are literally solar panels. Again, the implication to the utility is now you're feeding electricity back into the grid, and you have to have a way to manage that. You have to a way to forecast it. You have to be able to understand what the voltage optimization is around that. So again, putting the foundation in place allows you to more seamlessly implement some of these other areas, whether it's batteries or solar or wind or so on. The implication to the utility is you've got microgeneration now in that particular instance, so it's no longer a monolithic generating plant. As a utility, you can't really control how many of these Uber batteries there are out there, or how many of these solar or wind turbines there are. So that can be very disruptive in terms of trying to do that demand forecasting. I think the other aspect is all of these things, and some people call it the Internet of Things, all of these devices, all of these things out in the service territory, they're going to be providing a lot of information back to the utility, information that's very valuable, but can sometimes be very overwhelming. And so the ability to operate it properly, understand the implications of it, mine the data, get the benefit from it, I think are all big implications to the utility.
And that seems to be an overarching narrative, isn't it? That actually it's about getting the intelligence out of the data. It's no point having teraflops of data or whatever it is if you can't make any sense out of it.
Right.
So how is this industry starting to engage with maybe other suppliers, the Capgeminis of this world or whatever, to help them make some sense of it? Well, where's the data leading us?
Well, again, companies like Capgemini, we have a whole practice around, we call it insights and data, which has many pre-configured rules specifically for utilities to help them make sense of the data. So where we've been in a utility, or a utility as our client, as our customer, where we've been in a utility and we've built these ways to which to extract and synthesize and correlate the data, we can bring those pre-configured solutions, those examples, to other clients. And a lot of it is correlation of data. So we can talk about the data that we get from the field, but we want to correlate that with your GIS data, your outage. There's a lot of different sources of information that all need to be aggregated and correlated and made sense of.
And just as we sort of coming to the end of our time here, I'm going to try and phrase this question in the right way. I've been commentating on the tech sector for a significant amount of my life, not just utilities, but technologies before that. You always have this storm of where, vendors are coming at it with new solutions and saying, hey, this is going to be disruptive, and then the incumbent industry being overwhelmed by all this stuff. Well, where do I actually go? My question to you is, there's clearly a lot of noise around this, external to the industry and internal to the industry. How real is it actually?
I believe it's very real. I believe that the solutions or the technologies will continue to evolve. There will continue to be claims made on things that may or may not always be real. But I believe that the foundation is there today, and I think the foundation is there to help the utility to become more customer-centric. And at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's about the choice, about being customer-centric, using the data to the benefit of your customers and for your own operational efficiencies. I mean, I get that.
And also, you know, within the fact that a lot of what the utility does is high capital infrastructure, which you need to put out, you know, how real is this notion that a lot of commentators are also putting out that the utilities need to change and adapt? I mean, could a utility do nothing and be quite all right?
I think there'd be a time horizon to that. You know, we hear a lot about the aging infrastructure and the aging grid and the ability to better understand and manage your grid and manage your load forecasting and make sure that you are either not overpaying for electricity because you have to buy it from somewhere else, or that you're not running the risk of brownouts because you haven't planned properly. So I suspect that in certain cases a utility could do nothing, but not forever.
And I think that's a great place to leave it.
All
Thank you
right.
very much, Peter.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure
Thank you.
talking to you.